I want to tell you about a moment that genuinely kind of embarrassed me, or at least humbled me. So I've been a financial advisor for about 2 or 3 years, and I thought I understood what wealthy people did differently, right? I assumed the secret was complexity, offshore structures, obscure tax vehicles, timing the market down to the day. But when I sat down with someone who had built an 8-figure net worth almost entirely from a modest salary over 30 years, I was waiting for the big reveal, the secret instrument, the insider move, right? But he slid his spreadsheet across the table and it was just overwhelmingly simple, almost boring. Every single pound that he'd ever earned had a job. That was it. That was it. That's the whole thing. And I drove home that evening feeling pretty stupid, to be honest with you. And then I felt something else. I felt excited, right? Because if this is what the actual foundation of serious wealth is, it's something that anyone could do. And that's what this video is about. I'm going to show you the exact three job framework. And it's one that I've seen replicated in many different forms across almost every genuinely wealthy person that I have ever worked with. So I'm going to show you how it works, but more importantly, I'm going to show you the mistake that is probably quietly costing you hundreds of thousands of pounds over your lifetime. So let's get into it. Before I give you the framework, I want to tell you about a couple that I'm going to call James and Sarah. Now, when I describe them, I want you to tell me if, honestly, whether any of it sounds familiar. So, James and Sarah were earning roughly £120,000 between them. Like, by every measure, they were doing well, right? Top 5% of earners, manageable mortgage payments, 2 kids in school, careers going in the right direction. They had about £60,000 sitting in a high street current account when I met them, just sitting there, effectively earning nothing, right? And here's the thing. They weren't sort of like being careless with it. They were being paralyzed by it. They were terrified to spend any of it on like a holiday because they felt like they should be saving it and investing it. But they're also terrified to invest it properly because they felt like they might need it for an emergency. So it just sat there for nearly 3 years before we had our meeting, generating absolutely nothing except financial anxiety. Now, when I first heard this from them, I thought, look, this might be the most expensive form of caution I have ever seen. Because here is the analytical reality of what was happening. If inflation averages just 3% over a decade, which frankly is very conservative based on what we've seen recently in the last few years, £10,000 in a 0% current account loses over a quarter of its purchasing power. That's not money just sitting still. That's money actively shrinking while they argue about what to do with it. And what was the reason this was happening? The £60,000, it had no job. Now, this is the insight that I've watched completely change the financial lives of nearly every single client that I've worked with. Most of these people treat their bank account like a bit of a waiting room, right? The wealthy, the people who actually convert their income into wealth, they treat their bank account like a recruitment agency. To the average person, a pound is just like a static object, isn't it? It just sits there waiting to be spent or saved until something happens to it, right? To a wealthy person, a pound is an employee. And like any employee, if you don't give it a very specific job description, it will just sit around doing absolutely nothing. It doesn't know what it needs to do. Or worse, quietly erode through inflation and opportunity cost. This is the 3-job rule. Every single pound gets ruthlessly assigned one of 3 jobs. And if a pound is left unemployed, if its purpose is unclear, that is where financial anxiety starts to breed. That was James and Sarah's problem. It wasn't their income. It wasn't their intelligence. They had the money. They just had unemployed pounds. So let me show you the 3 jobs. there is this myth in personal finance that spending money is inherently bad, right? That true wealth comes from ruthless frugality, skipping the £3 coffee, missing the avocado toast, never going to the pub, live like a monk until 65, and then enjoy yourself if your knees still work. Look, my wealthiest clients actively disprove this every single day, I would say. They spend money, often very lavishly, but, and this is the critical bit, they do so with absolute intentionality. The job description for job number 1 is simple: to facilitate your life today and bring you a high return on joy. Look, when a wealthy person assigns £1 to this sort of job, it's liberated from guilt, right? If you allocate £100 a week for pints with your mates or theatre tickets or a hobby that you love, that pound is fulfilling its exact intended purpose. You don't need to feel guilty that it isn't working for you, that it isn't invested, because its job isn't to grow. Its job is to keep you sane, happy, and actually enjoying the life that you're working so hard to build. Now, there's a bit of an analytical layer that goes on underneath all of that. Every pound has what's called a diminishing marginal utility, right? The first £2,000 that you spend per month keeps a roof over your head and food on the table. High utility. The next 500 quid goes on leisure and small joys. Still good, but a little bit diminishing in terms of utility. But if you're just mindlessly tapping your card just because you've got cash sitting unassigned in your bank account, buying things that you really don't even care about or have no joy or utility, these pounds are failing at their job. It's not about just arbitrarily spending money. The wealthy people that I know kind of audit their joy. They value what they're spending money on in terms of it bringing joy. The average person just guesses at it. So this is your first bit of homework. Look at your last 3 months worth of spending. Which purchases and which experiences actually brought you joy? And which were just unemployed pounds drifting away because nobody gave them a job? That is job number 1. Now, if job number 2 is about enjoying the present, job number 2 is about building an impenetrable, blimey, easy for me to say, perimeter around your life. So I've got this client who's older now, retired, happily retired, but he spent his entire working life without income protection insurance. And when I speak to him now, he will tell you that that is one of the biggest financial decisions that he's actually ashamed of. Not because he ever needed it. Obviously, he's reached retirement without having to ever sort of take out that policy or use that policy that he never had. Because he feels ashamed because it's a decade that he spent terrified that he might have to use it. So job number 2, the pounds are your bodyguards. Their role is entirely defensive, and pretty much they're split into 2 divisions. Division 1, the emergency fund. Most people view an emergency fund as like a little bit like dead money, right? They groan that it barely matches inflation in an instant access savings account, and they feel like they're losing out. I totally get it. But the wealthy and the people who do this effectively understand something different. The ROI on an emergency fund is not measured in interest rates. It's measured in decision-making power, right? That's the ROI of that. When you have 6 months worth of expenses sitting as your shield pounds, you can negotiate things like your salary harder because you're not terrified of being fired. You can absorb a broken boiler without reaching for a 25% APR credit card. You can walk away from a bad business deal. You can take calculated career risks. The yield on that peace of mind is effectively infinite, right? You cannot put it on a spreadsheet, but it is by far one of the most highest returning capital in your entire financial life. Division 2, the risk transfer, income protection and life insurance. Here is something that my wealthiest clients understand that, generally speaking, most people kind of missed. Your greatest asset isn't your house, it's not your pension. It's your ability to wake up every single day and earn an income. And yet, most people don't understand that. And they certainly don't protect it. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, this sounds like you're just trying to pitch me insurance. And I get it, that's fair. I get that reaction to this constantly, but just please, hear me out for 30 seconds. A few pounds a month assigned to an income protection policy does a staggering amount of heavy lifting. Okay, it's a tiny fraction of your wealth today, generating hundreds of thousands of pounds tomorrow if illness, injury, or tragedy strikes. The wealthy do not self-insure catastrophic risks when they don't have to, because they understand that one bad diagnosis or one bad event can undo decades of discipline. So an income protection policy is just the notion that if anything happens to you, you have an insurance policy that pays out a monthly income for a certain period of time that covers and protects your most valuable asset, your income. That is job number 2, the shield. And now we arrive at probably the most analytical job of all, and the one where the gap between the wealthy and the average earner widens to an absolute chasm, the builder pound. Its role is to sort of secure your future financial independence, to make sure that you don't have to keep trading your time for money forever. And here's the secret that I've watched my wealthy clients master that almost nobody kind of really gets right, I would say. Assigning a builder pound requires 2 distinctive decisions. Decision 1, where does that money actually live? The key here is to balance 2 primary vehicles that we have access to in the UK. So you have an ISA. Now, an ISA is funded from net pay, meaning that obviously HMRC has already taken income tax and national insurance, and that's the money that lands into your bank account. But once it's inside the wrapper, all future growth and income are entirely tax-free, essentially. And critically, you can access it at any age for any reason without penalty. Then you've got a pension, right? Which most people will fund via what's called their gross pay via salary sacrifice through work. So sacrificing a little bit of your salary, not paying any tax on it, and it goes straight into your pension. By salary sacrificing before it's taxed, you keep a substantially larger amount of your money. A £100 contribution to your pension might only cost a high rate taxpayer £58 out of their take-home pay. That is an instant return that no investment on earth can match at the moment you make it. The trade-off, though, of course, is total lockup, right? You can't access that money until retirement age, which is currently 55, and soon to be rising to 57. So just assume it's locked away until 57. Now, I would say that the thing that I keep seeing from my most successful clients is they kind of balance both, right? I'm a big believer in pensions as a really, really good way to leapfrog the tax friction and start to build wealth. And pensions are great for aggressively upfront giving you that tax relief for later years. But ISAs, they're there to build accessible wealth for people in their 40s and 50s. So it's about getting those 2 time horizons married up to what you need to do. And decision 2 is, what is it actually doing? Now, this is where the wheels fall off for most people. And I want to be really direct about it because it is costing millions of UK investors a fortune without them even realizing. So millions of people will open an ISA, right? They just tick a box. They feel responsible. They tell their partner over dinner that they've done a good thing. Then they will leave money sitting in cash in a cash ISA. Effectively, what you're doing there is you're treating your builder pounds like your shield pounds. They choose a cash ISA because they're terrified of short-term market drops. Now, builder pounds are not supposed to be safe from volatility, from the ups and downs. Their job, their entire job, is to go out into the global economy, work 24 hours a day for you, and come back with more pounds. To do that, they need to be invested in a stocks and shares ISA, buying globally diversified investment funds that meet your attitude towards risk and objectives. Let me show you what the difference between these two things actually look like. And I promise this is worth 30 seconds of your full attention. If you leave £500 a month in a cash ISA, yielding roughly the rate of long-term inflation for 30 years, the real purchasing power of that money barely moves. You just have the money that you've saved effectively. Now, if you put that same £500 a month into a stocks and shares ISA at an inflation-adjusted 7% return, which is kind of the historical average for a stock market heavy portfolio, after 30 years, you would be sitting on roughly £605,000. That gap is not luck. It's not timing. That's the wage that your builder pound earned while you were sleeping. Now, I want to be honest with you here because I think that most finance content glosses over this part. Knowing all the framework is the easy bit, but choosing what to actually invest in, which funds, which weightings, how to think about risk when markets are falling, and every other instinct to tell you to sell, that's where most DIY investors either freeze up, panic at the worst possible moment, or end up choosing and chasing whatever was trending on social media last week. That is genuinely why I built my investment community beyond the markets. It's where I share in full detail exactly how I invest my own money and how I invest my money for my high net worth clients. It's the same approach that has outperformed the market since 2017. So you can stop second guessing every decision. Stop refreshing your portfolio 12 times a day with anxiety and start following a professional strategy that's been stress tested through volatility, through corrections, through everything that the last 10 years has thrown at it. The link is in the description below. Absolutely no pressure. If it's not right for you right now, no worries. But if you want to take your investing to the next level, and if you've ever had that nagging feeling of, I think I'm doing this right, but I genuinely have no idea, that's exactly the gap that the Beyond the Market is built to close. So in the description, if you want to check it out. Right, back to Sarah and James. Here's what happened when we applied the 3-job rule to that £60,000 they had in their current account. £15,000 was placed in an instant access savings account. Job 2, the Shield. 6 months of full expenses, fully funded, done. £50 a month was redirected into an income protection policy. Cheap, quiet, doing enormous work in the background. £35,000 was pushed into a stocks and shares ISA to actually build and start growing. Job 3, the builder. And critically, as I said, it was invested. It's not sitting around in cash. It was actually working. And the last £10,000, it stayed in their current account, explicitly labeled as Job 1, Joy, because it was clearly labeled that way and they wanted that to happen. Now they had this ability to think, right, we know what this is for. Guess what they did? They booked a guilt-free 2-week trip to Italy without a second thought, without the nagging voice in the back of their heads. Look, they didn't earn a single extra penny that month. But by thinking the way that wealthy people structure their money, by giving every pound a job, they instantly felt hundreds of times wealthier. That is the magic of this framework. That is the magic of giving every pound a job. Now, you'll notice that one of the things that we haven't talked about is allocating some of your pounds and giving them the job of paying off your mortgage, which there is a super credible point to be made about paying off your mortgage being effectively the same as a builder job, which is why I really think that you should watch this video here next, because there is some really critical things that you need to get right if you're looking to overpay your mortgage. And there's actually an exact point where it makes zero sense anymore. So give it a watch now, and I will see you there, my friend.